SOS is the highly anticipated, long-awaited second studio album by the artist named SZA. This is coming after her first studio album, Control, which literally came out 5.5 years ago. That one being on June 9th of 2017, this one being December 9th of 2022. This one being quite the release, quite large, clocking in at 68 minutes with 23 tracks total. For the longest time, I really wasn't a SZA fan, not because I disliked her music, but just because I hadn't heard a lot of it. I believe the first time I did hear her was on the Black Panther soundtrack for the song All the Stars, which I do think is a pretty good song. But it definitely wasn't until I first listened to Control when I thought, oh wow, she's very talented, not only as a singer, but to an extent even as a writer. So I went into this record mainly just hoping for more of the same from what we got on Control. And I would say we somewhat had that with the singles leading up to this scene. We had Good Days, which came out almost 2 years ago now, but I think is a really good low-key acoustic cut. And then the single right before this album came out being Shirts, which I think is also good and catchy and much different from Good Days and I Hate You. Wasn't as into I Hate You, but leading up to this album I was expecting it to be at least decent, and I would say that it is, even with its length and bloated track listing, which I guess I'll get into that right away if I'm talking about one of my biggest issues with this thing. It definitely did not need to be 23 tracks long. Towards the early 20s of the track listing, I mean, and honestly maybe even the late teens, 18, 19, 17, I was starting to get a little bit tired of the gimmick. It did kind of start to develop a formula of having 2 or 3 tracks that were more emotional or passionate, and then having 2 or 3 more that were a little bit more chill and more vibey. The instrumental passages were also starting to feel a little bit repetitive at this point. We would go from consecutive tracks that were more of a indie rock or indie pop style to more R&B, trap, pop, fusion kind of thing going. Even though I do think some of the best songs do pop up on this last leg of the record. We have the song Good Days and Shirts. Open Arms is a really great one as well, with a really good Travis Scott feature. And then Forgiveless is easily one of the weirdest songs on here. It features Old Dirty Bastard, who's worked into the track in such a bizarre way, but it actually does kind of work for me. When I first heard this, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I do think it actually is an effective sample here. You know, basically it is sort of like a sample. I kind of dig it. I can see why some people may not like it, especially if you're not familiar with Old Dirty Bastard and his way of delivering lines. It's definitely off-putting the first time you hear it, but I think it actually works pretty well here. Even though it is maybe a bizarre way to close the album, I don't mind it. With that being said though, I do still feel like SZA maybe tries to fit in too many ideas and also just too many songs into this album, and it results in less coherent experience than what we got with Control, even though I do think a good amount of these ideas do work, and actually surprisingly work at some moments. Forgiveless definitely being one of them. Another one that really stands out to me is F2F, which is this alternative rock banger, a song that absolutely should not have worked, and I was kind of not blown away, but just really surprised at how well it went over as I was listening to it. I didn't realize this the first time I was listening, but supposedly SZA actually had a failed engagement at some point in her life, and so reading these lyrics, it does hit a bit harder now knowing that, as well as on the next track, Nobody Gets Me, which flirts with going in somewhat of a country direction. The chord progression on this thing actually reminds me a lot of Wild Horses by the Rolling Stones, and that is one of the more country sounding songs. Some other track standouts for me are the song Kill Bill, which not only plays with the concept of the Kill Bill films, but also has this melody that SZA delivers that I can't quite put my finger on what it reminds me of, but it just feels old-timey. There's something very nostalgic about the way that it sounds. Low is a very smooth, ominous, dark-sounding trap cut on here. It kind of reminded me of the song Off the Grid, except if that song didn't have the drill portion of it and just had the first minute and 15 seconds or so carried out throughout the rest of the running time. Blind is a pretty simple but chill track with a very nice guitar lick being played and these great plucky sounding strings Snow on the beach says hello. SZA's vocal chops really shine through on the song Notice Me, especially in the second verse. That line, she's like, "Say all this and more, sis." This is followed by the song Gone Girl, which is one of the longer tracks on here, as well as one of the more mature and ballady sounding ones, if that is even a word, ballady. I like the chord progression on this one, and it has some pretty nice and unexpected changes on the back end with the bridge and with the final chorus. It has a surprisingly triumphant finish. Ghost in the Machine was one that I was really looking forward to. It features Phoebe Bridgers, who is an artist that I like quite a bit, and I was excited to see how their two styles would coalesce and come together, and I think it goes over really well. I would have maybe liked more from Phoebe. It's really just one verse that she delivers, but I think it's nice, and I think this is also one of the lyrical highlights to come out of the entire album. With SZA talking about artificial intelligence and technology and how in some ways this is almost making human interaction be a thing of the past, at least at times it seems like that. There are arguments to be made for sure over whether or not this is true or whether or not you agree with her, but I do certainly understand that mindset. I think the features on this album really all shine and come through strong, with Phoebe Bridgers, with Travis Scott, with the Old Dirty Bastard sample, and even Don Toliver on the song Used, I think provides a really nice performance. That's kind of it for me as far as the most noteworthy highlights and best tracks on here go. There were a couple others that I do remember liking, and I will list in the description under my favorite tracks, which I always put. I don't know if you guys always see that, but I do put my favorite tracks for every album that I review. I was pleased with this thing overall. Like I said, it is too long. There were more than a few moments where I felt like maybe this song was unnecessary, or some of the production is a little bit bland sounding at times. Lyrical content, though also good in certain moments, does feel a little bit repetitive. However, there was quite a bit of variety to this thing that I did enjoy, and certainly there are more than enough moments on here that make up for maybe a couple of lackluster ideas or lackluster specific tracks. This for me is a step down from Control, but not a huge step down, because I do think overall it was still a good effort, just maybe too long and too, like I said, bloated at times. I would still give it a 7.5 out of 10 though. There were still quite a bit of moments and quite a bit of tracks in here that I did really enjoy, and I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else thinks of this thing. As always, still let me know what you think. What are some of your favorite songs on here, or how do you think it compares to Control? As always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you whenever my next video comes out. Peace out.